To call our October meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. Let's start with roll call. My name is Norm Tanina. I'm one of the co-chairs.
Todd Hutton, co-chair.
Jeff Jackson, treasurer.
Jane Kilburn, secretary.
Cindy Finney, past chair.
Terry Embright, board member.
Herb Cook, board member.
Staff.
Steve Robinson, executive director.
David Timmons, acting associate director.
Joan Rakowski, staff, board liaison.
Cody Griffith, staff.
Lindy Monty, staff.
Okay. Oh, Holly. Did Holly Heights with us also? So
This is David Beck.
Oh, okay, and David Beckman, who's on mute. Okay. I'm not aware, welcome everyone. I'm not aware to any changes to the agenda, but I do want to acknowledge that this is Dave Robinson's last meeting as executive director of the PDA. And the board has plans to appropriately honor Dave at our next meeting as our guest, in addition to some other plans that are in the works. So stay tuned. But again, Dave, thank you for everything that you've contributed to the PDA all the way back to 2011 and even before PDA was chartered. We would never be here without you. So.
I don't see a party hat and balloons there, Dave.
Next month.
Just wait, you're gonna love November, Jane.
Yeah.
And we're gonna have you do a portrait of Dave, painting of him during the meeting. And we're gonna
I can do that. Oh,
on you.
yeah, I'm real good at portraits. Not.
That's all right. Dave could use a caricature right now, so.
Okay. With those sentiments behind us, let's move to public comment. Do we have any public that's submitted any comment, Joan, or do you see any hands raised?
Let me check that out. I did not receive anything in advance via email. And if any of our attendees wish to say anything during public comment, just press the raise hand icon on your dock for Zoom, or if you're on the phone, just hit *9, and then I'll see your request to speak. I'll just give that a minute or less. Yeah, it does not look like anyone's requesting, so I think we can move on.
Okay. There are in the communications of interest, we have our annual report from 2019 included, in addition to an article on the Jefferson Community Conservation Corps that I think the board might find interesting. We have a consent agenda that we need to approve today. We have 2 sets of minutes, one from August 24th, the other from our special meeting on September 10th. So any suggested edits to the minutes? Without any, can I have a motion to approve the 2 sets of board meeting minutes that we have?
So moved.
Second.
It's moved by Terry, seconded by Cindy. All in favor of approving the minutes?
I
Aye.
did want to say about the annual report is very well done, Dave, Joan, whoever did it. And it was so nostalgic.
I know.
Oh, that's right. I remember the thing. Oh, yeah. I remember when life was real and normal, but yeah, it was quite a year, and we sure faced some challenges even then financially, but I think it was a hell of a year. So thank you.
Yeah.
Understand that, Jane. And Joan did a great job on taking the lead on that.
Yeah. Thank you.
And nostalgic is a great word for that, because
Yeah.
it seems so long ago, right? And Leela has joined us, so let's.
Yeah,
note that.
sorry.
You know, Norm, just to add to Jane's comments, I mean,
Yes.
we all felt the same way, but it also maybe, at least for me, served as a bit of a reminder and a bit of a, what else here's why we're here. Here's what we've got to work for. Here's why it's worth the pain and suffering and personal, sacrifice that we've all made, and as well as our employees over this time period. So in a way, it was almost a little bit motivating,
Mm.
I think. Obviously said with hesitation, but I mean, I felt that way.
Thanks for sharing that, Jeff. It's something we all probably can use. So. Okay, we have Renee with us today to talk about Madrona Mind Body and some of the exciting things going on that over in Building 310. So thank you for joining us today, Renee.
Thank you for having me. Everyone can hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. And I'm going to share my screen in just a moment. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you. And I want to give a special shout out to you, Jane. I think it was 3 months ago, maybe close to 4 at this point, when we were on a call, a meeting like this about the collaborative and talking about the PDA and what we could do and re-envisioning and reimagining and dealing with all of the issues, the pain and suffering, I think that Jeff said. And Jane stopped and she said, I'd really like to know how the partners are doing. And so I appreciated that, Jane, at the time. I think I got a little choked up because it was really gracious of you to ask how we were doing. And I think that all of the partners really appreciated your interest in hearing that. Always these few moments where you say, is it all going to work? Slideshow here. All right, I think everybody's got it. So there's our beautiful Building 310. I think almost all of you have likely been in Building 310. Maybe you could raise your hand and tell me if you've actually been to a class or a workshop or a special event in our building. Looks like several of you. Good. Well, I'd love to have you come by. We have less going on now than we normally do, of course, but anytime you'd like to come take a tour of the building, we love showing it off. We think it is one of the most elegant buildings on campus. It's certainly an iconic building. And as you know, Alicia Alvarez, our co-founder, put in blood, sweat, and tears and lots of investment in this building over the last 14 years to help make it be where it is today. So typically before the shutdown, this might have been going on in our building. You might have had activity in 3 different spaces. Upstairs in the Madrona room, the room at the top right stair on the right-hand side as you come up the stairs. You might have had things going on in the ballroom, downstairs in the billiards room where we had spin classes for a while. There might be a meeting going on in the gathering room of the partners or Fort Worden folks. So there was lots of activity, lots of what we call joyful noise in our building going on pretty much all the time. And in fact, our business model was based on utilizing the building to its fullest capacity for local programming like these classes here. And then also, of course, for residential retreats. That's been a really big part of our programming model from the beginning. So workshops, retreats, training programs, we would have people coming for 10 days, 2 weeks, literally from all around the world. We have, I think the year before last, we had more than 20 countries represented by the people who came to the programming that we offered at Madrona. So that balance of local programming and residential trainings and retreats as well. And of course, that's a big part of the Fort Worden economy. Our faculty come from all around the world, really the internationally renowned people. We perhaps not quite as well known as Esalen, but that certainly has been our goal to be up there in that sort of high ranking of world renowned. And we do call ourselves locally loved and internationally renowned because we really are. Concerts, lectures, special event. There's our ballroom set up for an event some years back. And also spa services, so hundreds of massages every year, and not just for our local community, but in particular for the Fort Worden visitors, people who've come with their RVs and traveled hours and hours to get there, and they get out and they say, gosh, I'm really stiff. I need those shoulders worked on or my back worked on. So that's been a big part of our business as well. And last but not least is our community involvement. I think most of you know about our Feel Good, Do Good yoga program we've been running for, this is our 4th year, I believe. And every month we do a complimentary or free yoga class, but it's by donation and it supports a different nonprofit in our organization, in our community. You can see the pictures of us down there below, bottom right, with the Rotary Parade some years back. All of that changed on March 16th when we got the word that we were to close, like many businesses, or all businesses really around the state. One of our teachers left that for us in the door when I came back after having closed after the last class on that Monday. It was a very eerie feeling to take that building with all that noise and activity and close it and lock it and not know when we were going to open back up again. But at the time, you know, we all really thought, well, this is going to be, what, a couple of weeks? We didn't know. None of us had any idea. So we were sort of gobsmacked and shell-shocked, and what do we do now? And we quickly did what our training teaches us to do, which was to exhale a little bit. And we started thinking, well, could we move our classes to an online platform? For the couple of weeks before, when things were starting to change, we'd heard people talking about this, and we thought, well, maybe we could do it, but we really had taken no steps whatsoever until that Monday afternoon. And we very quickly mobilized. And in less than 48 hours from when I locked that door, we had created an online logo. This is it, Madrona at Home, taking our practice online. We had recruited one of our teachers, this lovely lady, Jane, who's in her 60s. And we said, Jane, you know, do you want to jump into this new world of new technology and figure out how to do this literally in less than 48 hours? And she did that Wednesday, bless her heart. And it was a big, steep learning curve for all of us, and it has been since then. Teachers had to be trained. And I have to say that teaching an online class is not the same as being in a meeting like we're in now. It is a very different experience altogether. And remember, we're used to being in a big studio space where we're moving three-dimensionally and bodies going in every direction. And now we're in this flat, two-dimensional world. We can't really see our students very well anymore. We had to figure out what equipment we had to get and hurriedly get a Zoom, corporate Zoom account, and figure out that, well, it works to be sitting in front of your computer without a microphone if you're close, but not if you're actually away from your computer demonstrating what to do. So investing in microphones, and I've got this little amp next to me called Scarlett that actually takes the the audio signal and takes it into the digital world so it can be read by the computer. So it can't just work that way teaching. You can't just set up your computer as easily. So we had to train our students as well, what that was like. None of them had done this before. Well, where to set your computer and how far away to get and how to get the Zoom link and all of that. And we had to very quickly do all that. And also safety considerations. For some of our modalities, if it's more of a dance class, it perhaps is less critical that form is exactly right. But in my practice, in my lineage, if someone's got their foot in the wrong position in a particular yoga pose, that could tweak their knee or hurt their back. So all of those considerations are really manifested when you're looking at people now this big on your computer screen as opposed to full body. And of course, all the systems that would support all of that. So those were things that we had to do really overnight. Long learning curve. It was the first month was rocky. And of course, remember that was the time when everyone was home, schooling was online, everyone was working from online. So you'd be about a third of the way through class and poof, the internet would go out. And you'd be scrambling and you could hear your students saying, I can't see you anymore. What happened to her? All that stuff that we've all learned. And fortunately, things are better. Zoom does have some advantages, I have to say. We have many new students. These are just a few of them. It is kind of fun to see our students now from home and seeing them join. And we have this deal that if they take a picture of their animal on their yoga mat, I'll put it on our Facebook page. So I think that's Pickle on the right. I've forgotten. That might be Zoe in the middle. I've forgotten who the little dachshund is, but many of you know Kate Comerford. That's their dog. So that's our new students. Gradually, we took our classes outside. So this is a NIA Fusion Fitness class on the grassy area between us and Copper Canyon. Here's one of our spin classes between us and facing the Maker Square construction. And we've had a great time all summer long with these classes that have been outdoors. So it's been really wonderful to see this happening. But of course, now we're back inside. So what would that look like if we had to come back inside? And once the governor actually gave permission for us to open small classes, we had to figure out what that could look like. So the first thing was that big, enormous ballroom. How do we space things out? I call this whole time period the blue tape and the tape measure, because I can't tell you how many times I have measured out exactly how many feet apart we could be. And each time the regulations change, it's a new theory. Okay, well, we have to have them this far apart or that far apart. We actually can have 10 students in the ballroom now with our space. And of course, we have doors on either end, so that really helps with the ventilation. We have those enormous tall ceilings. So we're very fortunate in that we have the safest place for mindful movement, certainly in Port Townsend, likely in all of Jefferson County, possibly in all of the Olympic Peninsula. There just can't be any places that are of this size, which is where I'm very grateful every day to the people who designed our building all those years ago. 114-year-old building being put to all this new use. And you can see that particular picture there. That was actually a computer in the front, so an online and an in-person class. But that's how we're spacing things out. And our in-person classes, we are masked. So there's another learning curve. What's it like to actually teach with a mask on? What's it like to be a student wearing a mask? And that's been a learning curve for all of us as well. I have to say that our building, which is used to having all this noise and joyful chatter and music, there is a quieting that happens when the masks are on. People come in and they're not talking as much. They're not talking back to the teacher. They're not asking questions. It's a little more church-like these days for now, but safety is the most important thing. So we're of course wearing masks, all of the normal protocols we've all learned to live with. We have a rigorous reopening plan that we built for the first time in May. It's been updated numerous times with all the changing protocols that covers how to keep our students, our clients, our people safe, to keep our building as safe as possible, props and equipment, everything having to be sanitized, shelving wiped down. What does this look like even from an administration standpoint? How can we not be handling cash transactions and credit card transactions? So many things, from that taking of the temperature as you first walk in, to all of the pens being sanitized, and special places for props that have been touched going on one cart versus clean props. And you can see that little narrow stairway there. So our building, like many of our older buildings, have these choke points. Well, someone can't come down the stairs if someone's coming up the stairs, so we have to rope it off. So there aren't two people trying to pass that narrow stairway at the same time. Community wellness. So we know that we have this unique facility, and I want to just promo this a little bit. When it was really smoky and people were trapped inside, people were getting really kind of crazy with all of the smoke, and we couldn't walk outside. And I know many of you know Terry Wagner. She's the one with the white leggings there in that picture there. She emailed me one day and said, hey, you've got this huge facility. You've got a great sound system. You've got a sprung floor, which means it's softer on our knees and our ankles and our hips. Could we just turn some music on and let people come and walk? I thought it was a great idea. So we tried it. We called it the Cabin Fever Walk, and we had a great fun. It was a wonderful thing to do. And so we are actually taking that now to the next level. So here's a little flyer about Walk on Wednesdays, and that starts this coming Wednesday, a week from today, which is November 4th. We're going to run this through the winter and the dark months. This is going to be a free class, a complimentary class. We'll put on upbeat, lively music and let people walk in the ballroom. Might be rainy outside. A lot of our seniors, which is probably most of us, may not feel comfortable walking in the rain or the wind, streets that aren't exactly even. So we're just really excited about having this as an opportunity. So help us promote this to the community, please. It's free. They do have to register because we're limited to 10 people, of course, mask wearing folks. So. And of course, you're probably interested in what's been going on financially during all of this time. Well, here is our old model. You can see workshops, retreats, trainings, and events, about 40% of our revenue, another 40% those local classes for our community, and another 20% massage. This is a roughly typical year. Well, the green and the salmon color, if your computer's showing the same colors as me, those are gone. And have been gone really from the beginning of the year. We don't anticipate any big return until well into next year. My personal belief is we're probably at the halfway point for all of this. I think we're going to be well into late spring before we have vaccines available for all of us. So this is what it's done to our revenue. We only have the portion of classes, and less than 20%. It's probably closer to 15%. That's what we've been living on for the last 8 months, and that's what we will likely need to live on for the next 8 months. Madrona is a huge building. It's 6,000 square feet. It was never designed to be a local studio. You would never have taken a building of that magnitude to have a local classes. So we had 3 options. We could close, We could just skinny down to being a local classes studio and move off campus, or we could try to find a building partner. And as you know, I am thrilled, delighted that we found really the most ideal partner for Madrona in Centrum. Centrum and Madrona have very compatible missions. We both do retreats, life-changing experiences, workshops, classes, and we have partnered with Centrum in the past. So we're very excited about our new partnership. We'll be sharing the building together with Centrum. That room on the left is the upstairs Madrona room. They'll be using that room. In fact, this past month, one of their artist in residence has been there. They've had another artist in residence downstairs in the old billiards room. They'll be using most of the upstairs, the office, and the upstairs bathroom, and we're going to be, for the large part, confining ourselves to the large ballroom downstairs. But we know we're going to be good roommates. We're planning for that already. There might be times they need to use the ballroom or that we want to use the upstairs room, and we'll be working out all of those protocols in the weeks and months ahead, because we do hope that as early as possible in 2021, we can be back to having people joyfully dancing like those people down at the bottom. That looks like Glow Lamson. I know many of you know her. And doing programming out on the beach and using our wonderful Fort Worden campus for all the things that it can be. So we're excited about our partnership with Centrum moving forward. Those are the three owners. You all know Alicia. A few of you know Annalie Mullen-Skelton. She's a conscious dance teacher, and her husband, Michael, teaches at Madrona as well. He's an internationally renowned trainer, and before the shutdown was training all around the world. Now he's doing Zoom like all of us. And there is our wonderful building again with a beautiful cobweb window. So I will stop sharing my screen and answer any questions that I can for you.
Thank you. I'd just like to say kudos to you and your partners and to Centrum for coming up with this creative solution. I just think it's brilliant, and I wish you all the best. You guys do such good in this community, and we need to keep that going.
Thank you, Jane. We have a very devoted community, local community, and we're really committed to health and wellness. This time period has been so difficult for so many people, and I don't think a week goes by that I don't get an email or a call from a grateful Madrona student who says, thank you for these online classes. They are keeping me sane. Yep. And the people that aren't taking our online classes, those that are coming back to the in-person classes, they're small, but they're very, very grateful. And it's really the grounding that we need. And we also know that the consequences of not moving, with all of us staying indoors more and not having the normal routine we're used to, will contribute to much greater issues of health issues. People will be less likely to be stable. They'll be more prone to falling. So we take our mission about wellness and health very seriously.
Renee, I have a quick question.
Sure.
I know we've all had to put so many things on hold or in abeyance, and things that, sort of cross-functional, group activities, I think. But I've always thought that, and I may be wrong, my perception is that we've under-marketed, undersold how important programs like yours are to just independent travelers, to groups who are not associated with Centrum or one of the other partners. Nothing wrong with them being associated with anybody, just anybody who comes to the fort who's not principally coming for Madrona, but coming for other reasons, camping, eating, whatever. I've always thought that your product, your service is so underrepresented in terms of our broader brand, our broader marketing pitch. And maybe I'm wrong. I'm not that close to that element, and certainly in the last 9 or 10 months haven't been, but I just hope we can get back to that kind of concept as a PDA, and as partners, where we're cross-marketing things better. So it becomes really a totality experience rather than, my customer, my client, where people come for all different reasons. And again, this is maybe less of a local initiative, but more of a broad-based initiative. So just something I wanted to say, and hope that we can all get back to that kind of thinking and doing and marketing, et cetera.
Thank you, Jeff. And I think it's important for us to recognize that. And right now we are limiting our classes to Jefferson County residents, which pains me because we do have people that were camping at the fort over the summer and they'd see us unlocking the door. You know, usually our doors were wide open. In fact, our building is one of the few on campus that has historically been open 7 days a week, because most buildings are not. And so people would
Right.
always walk in and say, hey, what's going on? They just want to see the building because it's such a cool building. And we'd often say, come on in and here's the schedule. Would you like to take a spin class? We've got yoga this afternoon. We've got a conscious dance class tomorrow, or Pilates. And we would have drop-ins from the
Yeah.
folks who are visiting, but we are not doing that now. We're limiting to Jefferson County residents.
Yeah, I understand that's a requirement and a necessity, and it's as it should be. I just hope that we can, when we start to pivot back towards, you know, our whole marketing, our whole experience, and some of these constraints go away. So we launch with that in mind, that, you know, when we're on Expedia looking for a last minute resident to fill a room that's that ultimately sustains all of the partners, that kind of activity, those kinds of customers. It's as much about the room and the place as much about what you all do as it is the place. You know, where else can you go to be near the water, to get a yoga class and sleep in a really, you know, historic building? I mean, I don't know.
It's an amazing
any other
place.
Places. Yep. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I
Other
had one
questions
thing I'd
or
like to
comments
say.
for Renee?
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
I just wanted to also mention that Port Townsend School of the Arts and Northwind have also done a creative thing in merging and to become Northwind Art. And again, we've got to give the credit to these partners who are just like being as creative as they say they are, and coming up with these great solutions to not only weather this storm, but to be even better going forward. So I want to give a shout out to Northwind and PTSA, as well as Madrona and Centrum.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Jane, I think we
For
also,
sure.
we ought to mention the collaborative, Renee's leadership,
Yeah.
the collaborative, and all the partners. I mean, all the partners are working to help this fort not just survive, but thrive in the future. You know, I think that's what's so critical right now. We're all kind of trying to row in the same direction, as they say. And I really want to thank all the partners again as well for that. There's a lot more to do.
I echo that, Todd. Thanks to everyone who's been involved in that. It's great to see the updates and the progress. And thank you, Renee, for telling your story today. I received your email this morning announcing the whole shift. So the timing is perfect for you to have the opportunity to tell your story. Thank you for agreeing to do that.
Well done.
Thank you. And Dave, good luck on this next transition. We know we'll still be seeing you. Okay.
And with that said, in terms of transitions, let's talk about the next agenda item, the PDA recovery plan update, and David Timmons will be taking this.
David, I can go ahead and, do you want me to go ahead and put that PowerPoint up now?
Dave, you're mute.
I got it. Sorry. I just was thinking in terms of after Renee's presentation, I feel like I'm going to be portrayed as the Dark Lord here. In terms of where we're at in the status of how do we get back to where we need to be. Beyond that, I think in terms of how does the PDA evolve and transition into a kind of a new and better model, maintain sustainability and viability going into the future. And I totally agree. It's going to be not just one single effort. It's going to be multiple efforts on multiple parts with players and partners all pulling together to get us to where we need to be. I think that that's going to be the biggest challenge. So can you put the PowerPoint up then, Joan? And
Yep, I will do that now. There we are.
last, the time period that I've been working on, I haven't had as much time to reach out to various people because what I've been discovering is, so many issues that were coming at me that, and the PDA, that it was hard to really get a focus on any single one. And so part of what I had to do was I discovered a significant deep dive into the financial situation that the PDA's found itself in. And this is not just one single action or one single event. It's multiple events that kind of come together. I think part of the issue started with the conversion of the finances from a cash position to GAAP. That's a very challenging effort for any organization to undertake. And it is a very complicated because the GAAP financing is an evolving process that you have to constantly maintain and keep up with. And so it really didn't give you a very accurate financial picture, I believe, of what was happening and what was going on as you kind of progressed through those years. And then when you had to transition to take over your maintenance obligations under the terms of the lease, that should have been, as Jeff mentioned, a pivot point. That's when there should have been a revised business model to modify picking up that anticipated cost. But I think that the degree and the level of the maintenance costs was something that was hard for people to really understand and to realize that how much it is, because there had been so much deferred maintenance. It was no longer a maintenance activity, it was a replacement activity. You couldn't just go in and fix the fire suppression system, you have to replace it. So those costs really kind of became a tipping point, so to speak, to the PDA's finances. And I think what happened then when COVID came along, that literally gutted sort of the income stream of the PDA, the main core, which was the group activities. So what I've done is I've tried to look at all of these issues that you're facing and tried to put them in what I would call compartments or areas of focus, which is consistent with our recovery plan, both stages 3 and 4. And these are all the issues that I've identified so far that we're going to have to create strategies, priorities, and assignments to basically start working through them. But the first 3 are the most critical. And what I'd like to do is go through this, and then I'll pause at each slide so the board can answer questions, because I think there's a lot of issues here that we have to bring you up to speed on. And then, as we progress through the years, we'll follow through this this model. Primarily what I found was all the issues, if you try to look at and add them all up, they're going to all come at you and overwhelm you. They're really, and that's where I was finding myself getting kind of overwhelmed, because it seemed like every day we were dealing with yet another issue and challenge, both internally and externally. So I reached out, and the first effort here identified is the state audit. We have the state audit is coming up for 2018, 2019. Also, as a part of that, we've worked with them to have them perform what they call an accountability audit. The year 2018 and 19, or 2016 and 17 ended up with an adverse opinion. So we're going back actually, and we're going to take a look at trying to restart with the 2019 financial review. We're bringing on some additional staffing support to help with that. We're working with the accountability audit, and then what the accountability audit will address is sort of that concerns that were left over from the 2016-17 audit. And a lot of the issues that we've identified that need to be addressed, I'm not going to get into how it happened. That's what the accountability audit will look at. They are going to take a deep dive on the organization's policies and practices to look at how do we explain the current situation and how we got to the situation that we're in. Also, the foundation is going to be reviewed as a component unit of the PDA. I know there was resistance to having that done in the past, but the state auditor's office is rejecting that and are going to do it whether you agree to do it or not. They are going to treat it as a component unit of the PDA. What that means is they will look not only at the PDA's financial records, but they'll be looking at the relationship between the foundation and the PDA and the monies and how it was transferred. And that's primarily because of the funds that are going back and forth and also the staffing relationships that were established. And so that's not a bad thing. I mean, that's something that they normally will do. It's just it all depends on a degree of involvement between the two parties as to whether or not you classify one or the other as a component unit.
David, I hate to split a hair. I don't think there was resistance. I just think that's the wrong word. I think there was concerns about what that might do to fundraising. The impacts of having a disclosure like that, I think were valid concerns that we needed to evaluate. And I'm speaking for the board, not the foundation now.
Okay, that's a good point.
But once we understood, I'll speak for myself. Once I understood the accounting requirements and that I thought it made a complete sense that we do them together, and it was not. I don't think we were resistant. That's all. I just wanted to clarify that, and it's a bit of a hair split. So, apologies for that.
No, that's okay. That's okay. It's just, that was the term used by the auditor's office. So
yeah, I'm not saying they're okay. So maybe I'm just speaking for myself personally then.
No, I would agree, Jeff. I probably should have used a different term. Part of what we're also going to be looking at as a part of the audit is I've brought on and arranged for another CPA who was recommended to me to go back and look at the 2015 forward during that conversion process from cash to GAAP to get us back on a consistent basis where we report out for audit purposes on a cash basis, but we maintain the accounts on an accrual basis on the general ledger. And she will actually be working in concert with Becky Wagner, who is another part-time CPA that we brought into the finance department to help us prepare for the audit. Because a lot of the things that I'm going to present next will be related to what we are finding as we prepare for this audit discussion. So the executive team would be the lead on this. That'll be myself, Holly Height, also Becky Wagner and Carolyn Cepetto. Tara Dunford is the other CPA who will be working on the account reconciliation from 15 forward. So all of this will be kind of in a process underway. And probably what will happen is the accountability audit will get issued independent of the financial audit, because we've discovered that we have so much preparation work to do to get to the financial review for 2018 and 19. We've got to reconcile the accounts to get the correct balances. That they may do the financial review actually starting next year. So we're working with them and kind of in a partnership now with the state auditor's office. And part of the reason that we can't just consolidate this is based on audit accountability. So we have to prepare the financial reports for their review. They cannot assist us in preparing those financial reports. So I had to bring in these additional resources to cover, preparing all of this documentation for them. We're also, as a part of the accountability, they've been doing a risk survey in terms of looking at the areas that they need to be looked at and focused on. So this work, as I mentioned, is underway. It'll probably take 3 to 6 months to complete before we see a full picture of the status. But what we will present will be an audited, hopefully an unqualified opinion for the 2018-19 financial review. And in this case, an unqualified opinion is a good is a good statement, not a bad statement. Qualified means they found issues. Unqualified find issues.
Just to point out also, these are not employees, they're contractors for us on an hourly basis.
Yes. Tara Dunford is on a contract basis, and Becky Wagner is on a contract employment basis.
And as in the past, a number of us will be asked to a number of board members will be asked to participate. And as in the past, it'd be great to have full cooperation with the process. So Todd and I have had discussions with the auditors as part of the opening process, and those will continue. And the Finance and Audit Committee will have a role to play here too. So
Yes.
So David, do we have a budget from the state for doing these audits?
Not yet. They are preparing that for us, and we probably should have it in the next couple of weeks. I plan to, more likely we'll be needing some special meetings between now and the end of the year to address some of these issues. That will be one that I will have to bring back and report to the board in terms of what they give us as an estimate of time and cost. They're doing the interviews, and then from that they will assess how much time they think that this is going to need. Most of this will be all done remotely too. We had a preliminary meeting with them, and it looks like the audit team will probably be working remotely instead of on site. So are there any questions on the audit process? We'll get started.
Dave, this is Cindy. You know, I understand from what you're saying that it could take upwards of 6 months really to take a look at all of our finances. How will that impact our ability to make decisions moving forward in 2021?
That's a good question. When I say 3 to 6 months, is to get through the auditor's review of the financials, but we have to prepare in advance of that our own financial statements. So we will have those within probably a month.
Okay.
For review.
Okay.
And I'll touch base on that in terms of what we're seeing in terms of what needs to be done to get to that point.
Okay.
I've asked David, Norman and I have asked David to be sure to engage the Finance and Audit Committee for more deep diving. I think that's very imperative going forward.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, I think that's what we're gonna need to get more involved on that to keep the board up to speed, as well as you know, handle those in a very transparent process. I think that's going to be critical. Okay, the next compartment that I set up is to deal with the capital financing. And what I've tried to do is look at these in the context of triage and priority, because the next two and three slides are going to touch on what I feel are the critical paths that we have to go down right now. The audit is going to be addressing a lot of the how on this, or the why and the how, but what I'm trying to report out here is just the facts in terms of what we've seen today and what we've been discovering in preparation for the audit. What we need to do for the capital projects is the goal here is we need to secure term financing to refinance lines of credit coming due for Maker Square and glamping, and also to look at refinancing the energy efficiency, totaling bringing the total of all those to $5.1 million that's owed to Kitsap Bank. The priority matter right now is Maker Square. They're really, when I discovered was there's a $1.5 million line of credit that was secured for Maker Square last December. That loan comes due this December. We don't find anywhere in the financials where there is funds that have been set aside or designated to repay that loan. In talking with the bank, they had originally recommended a term loan, but that wasn't carried forward. So now you've got a line of credit, and generally the way a line of credit will work is when you completed you're borrowing in advance of income for the project that will pay off the line of credit at the end of the project. So in theory, we should have a $1.5 million surplus at the end of the project to pay the maturity on the line of credit. We would do that at the city a number of times with major projects because that's how you manage your cash flow. But the draws on a line of credit for Makers, it turns out that $400,000 was diverted to cover the operating losses in the early shutdown period of the PDA. So what's going to be required after we reconcile the project cost is that we need to get a new loan to restore those funds and to cover an additional $500,000 in revenue that's going to be necessary to complete the project. One of the other things that I discovered as well was that the additional $500,000 is the amount of the retainage that apparently was not withheld in an account anywhere. So essentially the PDA didn't fund the retainage that will come due at the end of the project. But looking at the cost of the project has also gone up, which is not unusual for projects like this, particularly for the historic renovation projects. You always find something more. But when we added up all the revenue and all the income and expense, we're coming up short $200,000 or $2 million, which is the amount of the loan and that $500,000 retainage. Also, it's going to be critical that we secure the historic tax credits, because now based on the cost reports that we have, 100% of the historic tax credit is going to have to be applied to the project. So as what was previously thought that there would be this excess income that would come as a windfall from the tax credits does not appear to be there. And that's primarily because of a grant that was originally obtained did not come through because the match had been spent before the grant had been committed. So there was a loss of that grant income that also shorted the revenues, which is going to take away that windfall that was anticipated from the tax credits. In addition, on the glamping, there's $600,000 that was diverted out of that account to cover operating losses during the early shutdown. So we're going to need to secure a new loan to restore that project funding, as well as put that money back in. That's another $2 million loan request that we're going to need to secure. That one we have more time. It's not due until the first quarter of next year. And then one of the things that we're looking at is refinancing the energy loan, because $300,000 was diverted from that to operations during the shutdown period. So we need to restore that money as well. So that means that we need to refinance the original loan for the energy project. Good news is when we do that, we'll be coming in at a lower rate because they have better rates today than when they did at the time it was done. This is going to be kind of a time-sensitive matter, particularly for Maker Square. In my preliminary discussions with the bank, we've agreed to separate out Maker Square as its own separate transaction and action. We have some preliminary terms. We need to negotiate final terms to get that put in place. It's going to take a lot of energy to focus on this in the next few weeks, because we have the deadline coming up for the historic tax credits that need to be closed by the end of the year. We're also running short on the ability to make timely payments to the contractor on the project, and that's creating its own separate set of issues that we're struggling with. So this is something that I see as probably the most challenging and critical task that we need to undertake right now. Because if we cannot we can defer the maturity date on the loan, but I feel the outstanding issues could jeopardize our ability to secure the tax credits. Because if any one of those does not materialize, then I hate to say this, it becomes a house of cards. The cascading impact that will have is going to be extremely damaging to the future of the PDA and the partners and the state parks. So this is one of where everybody's got to get on the same page to help do whatever we can in the next few weeks to secure this with Kitsap Bank and put all of this in place for Maker Square. Then we'll have some breathing room to begin to address the other two issues and projects. So the glamping project is, as you can tell, if you've been up there, is not complete. The materials are there, but they have not been finished off. And so there's a lot of work that still needs to be done so that restoring those funds to that project will allow us to at least get the project completed. And so I think we have a path forward. It's going to require a lot of concentrated effort in the next month to achieve the goals that we need to do here. And I know this comes kind of like as a surprise, but it's something that also came as a surprise to me in terms of as we started doing a deep dive into the project and the PDA's finances in preparation for the audit. We're learning all of this as we go along. And when I saw this is the one that made me hit the panic button and felt that this is the one that we have to deal with it. We have later on in your agenda a motion to authorize us to finalize the terms with Kitsap Bank on the Maker Square loan. I feel that is if there's one thing that's critical, that is the most critical action that you could take today. Is authorizing us to get started on that. As I noted here, I'm looking at the finance team, the PDA treasurer, Jeff Jackson, and then myself will be working on this as a team to kind of pull all the final pieces together. We're currently now, Kitsap Bank has made a request for a lot of financial documentation, and we're submitting that to them as we get it, and we're putting it together. And so they've been very cooperative with us. But there are certain conditions that we're probably going to have to meet that are going to require some discussions and dialogue with a lot of different parties.
David, as our two CPAs work on this, retrospective and current, I would like to see them and you inform the Finance and Audit Committee about how all of our financial reports in April through June or March through June, we were receiving revenue and expenditure reports on a regular basis. And nowhere was it indicated to us that we were using capital dollars for operations. So I think we need to understand how that happened and why it happened. I think that's critical. So again, I don't anticipate it's ever going to happen again, but we need to understand why it happened.
Yeah, I actually brought that to the attention for the auditors to examine.
Good.
Ask them to kind of indicate to us how and why this happened, or how did it happen and when did it happen. And I'll touch base a little bit on that in my next slide.
Well, I'm with you, Todd. This should not be a surprise to the board, and I'm just stunned.
So any questions on this one?
David, I just think that as you work through your timeline to complete this financing, I'm happy to pitch in, of course, but it may make some sense to put send a doodle out and put a finance and audit committee request a few days before, you know the time frames, a few days before we need to complete it.
Mm-hmm.
I'll of course be available one-on-one, but it may be, I'd love to make sure that Cindy and others are in the loop on this.
Okay, yeah, okay, we can do that. To secure the loan, it's a resolution of the board to accept conditions. And so that's what we'll be putting together, is that resolution. So, and I would anticipate calling a special meeting just for this purpose. But I agree, Jeff. I'd love to have the Finance and Audit Committee look at it first, and then we can touch it up and bring it forward. Okay, move on to the next. The 2020 finances, we need to restate the finances to reflect actual conditions and adjust the organization to reflect real-time conditions. The original reopening plan actually overstated income and understated expenses to maintain the reopening objectives. And the financial reports presented to that did not tie to the general ledger. This goes to your concern, Todd, about not seeing the full picture. It appears that the full picture was not being presented. That's what Becky Wagner, our CPA, is determined, and I've asked her to go back and take a look at this and we can actually, we're going to prepare a report where we can show you where the differences occurred between the general ledger and the reports that were being presented. It didn't take into account the diversion of the capital. It didn't take into account some other things that she has discovered. So what was happening as we moved through the reopening was revenue to expense was not generating net revenue. It was just covering the operating costs on a month-to-month cash basis. Payroll was made a priority, but sales have been running below the goal. And what I'm looking at projecting forward in November and December, the sales are not going to cover costs. There were many environmental factors also that were impacting our bookings and the ability to maintain that goal. I think the staff has just been doing an incredible job trying to do the best they can with the situation they were handed. But what we were discovering was that there wasn't, for some reason, there was a disconnect that I'm trying to sort through as to why it was happening. But right now we're looking at an accounts payables balance of about $200,000. Most of this relates to fixed monthly costs for like utilities, insurance that are 3 to 4 months delinquent. And they run anywhere from 25 to 50K depending upon one-time contracts that are expensed out. And what I'm looking at is with the income that was coming in, we're not able to keep up with those fixed costs and payroll both. We've got to make some adjustments. We're looking at those now. We just also discovered, there were 18 Bank of America credit cards out there. We closed down 15 of them. There's an American Express credit card that has a balance owing right now of $60,000. $20,000 was used for payments on the glamping project that we can get reimbursed for. and pay down. But the other was, it was looked like during the closing period that the account was being used as a line of credit. But the problem is that there wasn't enough income to pay down that line of credit to keep the balance down. So we're working on we've closed that account since then, so that we're not going to be using that anymore. And also the restrictions on the 3 remaining credit cards, because there are some vendors that require credit card payment. They won't take any other source of payment. So we're using that, but under tighter control. So what the bottom line is we've got to adjust our operating conditions in 2020. It's just, I don't know how we're going to end the year without going into the red. But, you know, it's too early to tell. The problem is, you know, Becky has been working, trying to sort through all of the finances, the financial reports and financial conditions, and basically getting them corrected to reflect actuals, so that, and it's taking a little bit longer than what we thought, because it was in a more difficult status than what we anticipated it to be in.
David, can I make a note also that credit cards were being used in lieu of purchase orders, for example? You know,
Yes.
And we really didn't, from what I can see, we did not have a robust purchase order system at all. Credit cards were used for all manner of types of things. Norm and I are going through 2 years worth of credit card records and looking at purchases line by line by line. We had dozens upon dozens of Amazon purchases that Norm has done a deep dive, and I've looked at all the other credit card purchases, and we've been flagging things that might be questionable. There aren't a host of those. It's just not, you know, there aren't dozens of those, but there are several that we're looking into at this point in time. We still have the Bank of America cards to look at as well right now. So
yeah, the way it was set up on Amazon was it was a business account with employees that would need to make purchases. We use they have their own account. It would all tie back to the American Express card. So we are restricting that until we can get the situation under control. But a lot of it appears a lot of the purchases were for supply items and things like that appear to be legitimate, but still it was lacking in a lot of internal control. But I think that the more difficult part was using it to pay utility accounts and other things that were not being current. So, but as I mentioned, we're working on how to address the outstanding payables, and that's going to be critical going forward to the remainder of this year. So I'm going to be trying our best to try to get that cleaned up, but I'm going to need a sounding board to work with. So that's why I'm recommending here the Finance and Audit Committee and the executive team will work together to go through all of this, get a good handle on it, so that we can address a plan. Because I think that the key here when you go into an audit is you forecast the issues that you're facing, and then you have a plan. And so that's why I started pulling all this together, so that we can present a plan to the auditors. We are aware of these issues, we're addressing those issues, and we're working it. So I think the last thing we wanted to find was to have the auditors come in and say, aha, look at this, and we don't have a plan.
I don't know that we ever knew that short-term liabilities that we saw included interest rates on credit cards. And it'd be nice to know, once Tara's working backward, nice to know the extent of interest payments that we paid on credit cards over the last several years.
Yeah.
We never saw.
The Amex card is at 29%. So the interest cost right now is about $1,500 a month. The Bank of America cards were Alaska mileage cards. And those are at a 20% plus interest rate as well, but those appear to be maintained more current. But what we did discover is there's like 174,000 mileage credits on an account, an Alaska Air account, that we have to figure out what to do with it. And then also on the American Express, there were points issued for purchases. And there's right now 700,000 points on the account that we have to just look into what can we do with them at this point.
You might be able to convert that to cash.
I think we are. I think that's what we're looking at, is applying it to the credit balance.
Mhm.
Because we have closed the account, so we have 30 days in which to claim the credits. And so we're going to look into that.
The other thing is, I don't know if any other board member did, and when we saw our payables report, seeing any credit cards listed
No.
on a monthly basis. And so I think it's another area where we were misled in the true short-term financial situation. So,
Yeah. I'm hesitant to jump to any conclusion as to motives, but, I want to look at this in the context of these are just facts that we have to address. The timeline on this is urgent because, I'm looking at, we're going to need to raise 250 to 350 to close the year in the net positive position. And that would include cleaning up all the account payables that are outstanding. And I'm breaking that down by category so that we can look at the majority of this will be utilities and one-time contract payments to organizations that we have to contract with for services like Cisco, and also for the fire protection, and those contracts. They're one-time contracts, but they're currently outstanding that we need to address. So we'll be going through those. So what I will need to do is follow up, as Jeff suggested, with a doodle poll, to start scheduling a series of finance and audit committee meetings to begin to address this as well as the capital financing. Because I think these two are extremely critical that we address before year end. So I would kind of put the capital as priority 1, 2020 finances is priority 2.
David, may I interject a few things here? Just
please,
maybe for a little bit of context, in the hopes that no one sees this as defensive, which is very possible, I think, right now. First of all, thank you for summarizing all these things, A, discovering them, and B, summarizing. I think a couple of things need to be said to put context to this. One is that we as a board have an enormous debt of gratitude to this. This all didn't start being discovered when David showed up, and I'm not taking away from anything you've done, David, at all. But a number of employees, some of whom aren't with us, some of whom were heroes and heroines in bringing many of the symptoms and many of the actual discoveries to light starting a year ago. I think probably there's a couple of board members that fit into that category too. And it's not, I'm not calling people out. We have some saviors, if you want to call them that, in amongst us that started to ferret these things out. And what we found out is that and as David said, no guessing as motives, but we found some I think we can get into that, what was happening and why it happened at a later date. I think, so I want to make that point. Secondly, as bad as this all is, and it's horrible, and as much of all of this that none of us have ever touched this kind of thing before, seen it before, we have got to find a way to sort of come together with David on this plan of moving forward and pivot out of this state into a state where we can begin to fix things and work together towards a better outcome. We can't do, we've got to find that sweet spot between finding all the malfeasance, solving it and moving forward and being positive about what we have here to manage. I know that's conceptual, and I know that's theoretical, I suppose, but that we can't dwell in this for long. It will kill us. We have to fix it, and we have to find a solution that we can build towards our future. So those are the two things I wanted to say.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Jeff. The staff has been very helpful in helping, bring these issues to our attention. And I think that it's, like you say, there are several that are heroes for stepping up when, they took a risk. And I think that
yeah,
it's very highly the integrity of the people that we have and have had. So I think that's a good point. But I also agree too, even as dark as this all looks, we have to look at it in the context of failure is not an option, to steal that phrase. I think by compartmentalizing these, we can isolate them and we can fix them one at a time. And that's what I'm attempting to do here, is put together kind of a strategy plan that allows us to address them in priorities, to look at, like I say, the first one is going to be, the audit is going to look at how we got to the situation of why this stuff happened. Capital financing, I can argue, and point fingers and things like that, but that's not going to help me get the solution I need to get. I got to get to that first, and then we can have a conversation about how it happened and why it happened and how it'll never happen again. The 2020 finances, it's not unlike anybody else in terms of this year has just been this god awful year of chaos and confusion. And we don't have time to assess blame at this point. I need to figure out how to raise this money so they can get this organization stabilized. Once that's in place, then we can then we can go into a whole lot of conversations on how to do it better.
Yep.
Okay, any more questions?
Agree.
David, this is Herb.
Yeah.
Can you hear?
Yes, I can. Mm-hmm.
Okay. My question arises from your statement that we have not been operating at a cash flow surplus, in fact, have been incurring losses even since reopening. And I'm trying to look forward rather than back. If you look at the 5 months from November through March, historically, the PDA has always incurred significant operating losses in those fall and winter months. And those losses, based on an analysis I did some months ago, have ranged over those 5 month periods from $500,000 up to about $750,000 net operating losses. So my question is, do you believe, as our acting executive director, that since we really can't anticipate in this environment being able to make any money in that 5 month period, that it still makes sense to keep hospitality services open during the period November through March of 2021?
Well, that's a discussion that we're going to need to have as part of the budget plan for next year. I think that the problem we have now is usually when you have those operating losses, you have a cash reserve that carries you through. In this case, we don't have the cash reserve. And because of the accumulation of the accounts payables not being kept current, the losses are going to be significant because we don't have any cash. What little cash income we have will just about cover payroll, to get us through the season. We do have bookings you'll hear about, that are coming in for November, December. But the problem is going to be, is it going to be enough income to just meet the cash requirements to sustain services? And I think that that's analysis we got to do going into next year.
David, can you share what the work that you've been doing around analyzing our fixed costs?
Yeah, well, one of the things I'm looking at is, what are the fixed costs that just to keep the doors open, in terms of, that would be your utility accounts, your contract services that you have to maintain for like elevators, fire suppression systems, things like that. That's going to be running, like I mentioned, anywhere from $25,000 to $50,000 a year, depending on the month when things come due. But just the 25,000, it would be your, power, water, sewer, internet. And I think there's areas that we got to look at in terms of, those fixed costs. Are there ways that we can try to bring them down? But some of those you can't avoid because they're fixed. Insurance is running at $11,000 a month.
A month?
The internet feed, NoaNet, is running at a little over $7,000 a month. Water and sewer is $4,000 or $5,000 a month. Electric, $7,000, depending on the season. It's $7,000 a month. So those are certain fixed costs that are going to have to be built in any model. And it doesn't matter how much bookings you have, whether you have a full house or if you have nobody here, you're still going to have to pay those bills. And the problem right now is we have no cash reserves. We're just going month to month to meet expenses.
And we need to make sure we can keep operations going for the partners too.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not, some of it is hospitality, but we also have commitments to our partners.
Yeah, and that's what I'm looking at, is just on the fixed cost. If we stop, the other flip side of that coin too is if we have current deposits and bookings and things like that, but if we shut down and cancel those bookings, then we have to owe the refunds to those deposits. So it's a kind of a catch-22. So what I'm working with the staff on is, how do we maintain, a support staff that can maintain and honor the current reservations that are coming in, to at least keep that, and try to find a different solution to carry the fixed costs so that we're not looking at, that we can keep the doors open and just manage what we can with hospitality going forward. It's also critical, I think, because you hear later too, Officers Row is coming offline for 6 months. That's a big income producer during that time period. But you got hit last year when the NCO went offline. So, we've got to fix that kind of situation so that actions of the decisions on the capital side of the projects don't impact your hospitality services and that income stream. But it's having that kind of an impact. I mean, I'm making it analogous to if I had shut down Water Street during the entire construction period because it was easier for us to construct without have to deal with keeping any businesses open. We just couldn't do that. We had to absorb that as a part of the cost of the project to maintain access to the properties and businesses. So I think that it's too late now for Officers Row to make any changes on that because it's just going to defer the inevitable. So I think that what we need to do is figure out a different strategy for next year. Okay, so next year is we got to present an operating budget. It's got to be done by December 31st. That's the requirement under state law. And we've got to look at how we adjust spending to the minimum necessary to meet the guest and partner needs. And that's the discussion that we were just having. We've got to get to look at that and come up with, because COVID is going to still be a factor going into next year. Officers' Row is going to be under construction and offline for the first half of the year. Glamping's not finished. We got to get that finished so we can bring that online. So all of these factors are going to be very unpredictable. So what I'm looking at is we need to look at a model going into next year that looks at cash basis, going month to month. Because you're not going to have any cash reserves. So you're going to have to look at how do we operate month to month, given these certain conditions that are in place. It doesn't look like group activity is going to come back anytime soon. We're going to have to explore other revenue generating models to see if we can get any kind of state shared revenues or a public facility district model, which could generate income, but they may not be in time for 2021, but they could be part of the plan to look at for 2021, part of the work plan. It's going to be kind of hard because the impact that COVID had in terms of, in the discussions it was the economic impact that really stripped the income from the fort. So the loss of income has been huge, but there is no way to or source right now that we've discovered that would provide any kind of replacement of that, even in part. So working with FEMA, what we discovered was they constrained the damages so low that it's almost doesn't make any sense to even pursue anything from FEMA at this time because it's only a couple $1,000s. But what I did is rather than withdraw our application, I had it put on hold because maybe there'll be some future funding options that'll come forward, following the election period, going into next year. Once everything settles down politically, maybe there could be some funding that we could tap into. So at least we will have an application in place that we can amend and modify in case something does come up. But planning for the budget for next year is going to be a challenge. So what I'm looking at would be a combination of the executive team, the finance and audit committee to get together to start putting kind of a month-to-month budget plan together and present it to the board for adoption by the end of the year.
Dave, I've got a question and a statement. At the beginning of this year, a few of us met to talk about the impact that maintenance has on our cash flow, recognizing that, it was substantial and we really were not in a position to sustain it. And we made some pretty drastic cuts. And I see that, as part of how we have to move forward is that we have to pay real close attention to the maintenance needs of the park. And I think there has been discussion about going back to state parks and asking for some help in the maintenance area. I mean, we're going to need that. If we go into the future without addressing some of these maintenance issues, we're going to exacerbate our problem.
Yeah. One of the things that we've identified is that we probably should have like $1 million maintenance reserve account if you're going to take on that kind of liability, because what we're finding is in a lot of the buildings, it's not maintenance, it's capital maintenance, because
Right.
the level of deferral on the maintenance, like the fire system, suppression system is the best example of that. It's gone beyond the point of repair anymore. It's now replacement. So should that be a capital responsibility or a maintenance responsibility? We've got to have those discussions. What I've been doing is having everyone look at the different buildings, and then basically we're sort of going to start looking at mothballing certain buildings and put them on minimum heat necessary to just get them through the winter, and not utilize them and keep them open. But because of the maintenance issues, because if we do have a major failure within a building or something that has to get done, well, the question will be, is it essential that we have to do it, or is it discretionary? So buildings we can basically sort of mothball for now, the less risk exposure we'll have to any kind of big heavy maintenance expense.
Yeah, I think Cindy's point here is quite important. And I think it's actually interesting what we need a partner. We need actually to follow kind of Rob and Renee's, or Renee and Rob's approach to this thing. And we need partners. We need, and our natural partners, because we had a financial strain going into this thing, as what Cindy just said. And then, we are the single most affected industry on the planet for COVID. So, and we need friends and partners. Our shoulders are not broad enough. The $7 million of revenue that we figured out how to generate is gone. And that was our partner, if you will. Independent travelers, group travelers, et cetera, allowed us to sustain our operations up until these maintenance and the existing relationships with partners. So as the art community has done in two cases now, and with Madrona and Centrum, and with the School of the Arts and their partnership, we need partners as well. And those partners are logically the city and the state, to Cindy's point. We can't bear this, we can't bear this alone. I mean, and potentially individual donors. So I think sort of this combination, this merger activity, if you want to look at it that way, that has some of our partners have engaged in, is essentially the model, or is a framework for a model that we've got to pursue.
Dave Robinson, Todd, and I started that conversation with state parks in late January, and that led into the discussion around delaying the revenue share. So, we have a lot of work to do on this topic. There are no done deals, and it's not going to be easy. But it's something that we need to continue to have dialogues about and try to push forward.
Next slide then. I'll try to speed it up here so we can. So organizational restructuring, the goal here is really to create a kind of a new operating model, just like we talked about. What I'm looking at for our organization is I want to consolidate down into main divisions, administration and operations. Capital is kind of a separate aside from those, because that's based on our capital demands. But then also looking at creating some new long-term partnership models. And one idea would be is to consider divesting some of the areas of the PDA's obligations to third parties. What is very common to do is like what we did with the recreation programming, is we basically created or invited in the YMCA and then sort of divested our interest in providing programming services to a third party that we then supported. If long term, I think it helped us. It didn't become as successful as I wish it had, because the county wasn't willing to join in at the same level. So it kind of became a two-legged stool instead of a three-legged stool. But I think there are different models that we can look at and that we can start putting in place. Would we have them in time to, that's going to be the challenge. Some of these we could look at going into next year that we'll need to start. But I think that the timeline for this is going to be, is currently underway as we're having certain discussions already. But I think it has to be an ongoing dialogue and discussion with the entire organization as to how to best move forward and come up with a new, different operating model to stabilize the situation. Much of this will probably have to be in place by the time, we get officers rolled back online, we get a vaccine in place, we get, so that you've got a timeline here to plan. But I think the future got to have longer term partnership models to make this thing work. So in effect, what I'm looking at here in organization is both an internal reorganization and an external. Okay, next. And then also we're going to be going through a leadership change. There'll be a transition to a new executive director in 2021. The thing that I've learned is that you're going to have to present a situation that is going to attract the right candidate. And then also what you need to look at is identifying kind of what are the challenges so you can look at the attributes and characteristics of the type of leadership that you want that's going to help you carry out your mission and your strategy that you develop. Having seen a lot of places in terms of you want to have a good match, but also you want to look at, there are certain people that are very good at fixing things. And then there's certain people that are very good at operationals, but you got to look at it in the context of like a 5-year term or a 10-year term of what's going to be the evolution of the organization and the challenges and needs of the organization. I always reflect on a story that I tell about, we had a solid waste district that we formed in the state. And it was the first one, and the first thing you had to do is come up with a plan. And that's what we did is we brought in the executive director who had a strong planning background. And that person got us to where we needed to be and got our plan approved. Well, the next phase then got into the implementation. The problem was that wasn't his skill set. And so we began to struggle and people were getting frustrated because here we were trying to implement the plan, but the leadership didn't have the skills necessary to take you there, so take us there. So that's something to think about during the recruitment process and the discussions. I know that you've put a lot of time into it already with the co-chairs, but you need to begin that process in the dialogue and discussion. But I think before you can actually present a flyer, a brochure, a job ad, we've got to have a plan. And that's reflective of the issues that we're talking about before.
David, I assume that your organizational structure will have to be accounted for in the 2021 budget as well.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
This may be a little bit out there, but I've known this to happen before where the executive position is basically split into two different roles because of, David, what you just said, sometimes people are great at the planning, but not at the implementation, but you still need both those components. And so that there's kind of a job share. And I've known this has happened in some nonprofits, and my husband was a board member of the Timber Framers Guild, who actually did a conference out at Port Townsend. They had two directors, and it really worked because they could look in two different directions at once, and they worked very well. And I'm just wondering if that's a model we could consider here, because I think we're going to run into trouble if we don't have that sort of practical and visionary thing going on at the same time.
Yeah, I think that you should think about that, because what you might want to look at would be is you've got this long-term reinvention that's going to have to occur. And that's going to require very specific skills and leadership abilities. That will be different than just the day-to-day operational side of things. So
Yeah.
you may have to look at the structure of that and modify it to reflect that kind of programming. The other is that, you know, some people will go into this knowing that they're going to be challenged to lead this one thing, but then they will hand it off to the next generation or the next person. So
Yeah, but then you lose a lot of momentum if you have to bring in a new person, you know,
yeah,
every couple of years to pick up the ball. It just seems like it's a little bit more cumbersome going into it, but if you've got the right team, then you've got a really solid position there going forward. And you don't have to stop and bring in new people and have the staff adjust to a new kind of leadership style and all that kind of, that'll
Yeah.
cost money and takes time and is debilitating to the staff too, I think.
yeah. I think that one of the things that, you know, I could safely say is the PDA of the past will not be the PDA of the future.
Yes.
It's going to be a different instrument.
Yes.
Moving ahead. Okay, the next then. Partner relations, and we've talked about this, but I think that we got to renew those discussions. We've got to get back to the table and start looking at how do we maximize the partner's investment. You know, one of the goals will be is to build a sustainable and viable model for everybody, not just one organization. So, and like we've talked about before, I think we need to begin a process. I'd recommend that we start that in January, because we've got the financial critical issues to deal with. But we need to be thinking in terms of projecting what our future next steps are going to be. And I think reaching out to create a much more deliberative, viable partnership model that looks at sort of a future vision and helps us create that. And I think that's going to be underway, you know, led by the collaborative and others. But I think that also we've got to do a more deeper dive in the partnership relationships, because I know the leases have been an issue, and we need to really grapple with that and bring that to some kind of beneficial closure for everybody. And that's going to take some work, but I think that we can get there. I just need time to get these financial issues in place so that we can have those discussions on how to move ahead.
Well, Dave, I think it's extremely important before we get into a deep dive on this, that number one, what you're doing is getting the financials straightened out so we understand where we're at. But to really, the next step is to determine how we move forward, is really to have everybody have a collective understanding of what it takes to make the fort work.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I think everybody's got their own view of what we need, but this is not an easy operation.
No.
And I think we really need to do a deep dive on the reoccurring, like you're doing, the reoccurring expenses, the maintenance issues, and who's going to help with what. So I think that's one of the foundation conversations we need to have.
Yeah, I think and that's one of the, I guess, what all the situation is bringing to light is kind of the harsh reality that everybody's going to be facing here. You know, in terms of being able to maintain these properties and maintain this relationship, it's going to require everybody to pull together at the same level. And it's going to take time to get there, but I think we can get there. And then the other is, I think, the foundation, I think, is an opportunity that needs to be built upon. I think that one of the things I've looked at right now is I'm working to create kind of a firewall relationship between the PDA so that it's clear what the roles are and the separations are between the foundation and the PDA, so that there's clarity around that. I think that right now it's sort of hard to sort out. And I think that that's one of the reasons that the auditors were bringing that to everyone's attention in terms of looking at it as a component part. So I think that once we get through the audit review and process, we can talk about how do we make it more transparent and clear with clearer lines of distinction between the foundation and the PDA and what that partnership looks like. And I think that that can be a project that we need to work on together, starting, in the 15th, and, looking to having that in place by the end of this year. I think that that's going to be kind of this one would be, I think it'll be easier to fix. It's not a big issue. I think it's just that it's lost its clarity. And I think it'll be easy for us to reestablish that. And then the other, I think, is we need to start discussions with state parks on the relationship with that. We've had some preliminary discussions with them. We were successful, Dave was successful in getting the waiver of the revenue sharing requirements. We've also, brought it to their attention, our concern about the maintenance relationship and transfer of the maintenance obligations, how that's not working. It needs to be addressed, but it's going to have to be, I think, rethought, because I think the original premise that everybody thought would work, I think we're learning is not working, because, if we were talking maintenance, one example is, you get into a project that's for painting the building, because of the conditions of the property and the conditions of the level of deterioration, you're not looking at just a painting of the building. You're now looking at, a $100,000 project becoming a $700,000 project. We're looking at, close to $3 million to upgrade the fire suppression system campus-wide. Those are things that the PDA cannot be straddled with independently. And I think we have to have some very frank discussions with state parks in regards to how can we move this forward in a more equitable manner. And I think those discussions will need to get started after the first of the year. Like I say, again, saying we got to focus now on our priority, which is getting the finances for the capital for this year and for next year in place by the end of the year. And then after that, then we can start having these conversations with all various partners, that need to come to the table to work with us, and that we need at the table to get through this. So, I mean, that's a lot to cover. What I did was I tried, like I say, I created these different compartments so that we could keep track of things and keep them organized so that we actually have a working plan. As things come up, and they do, I feel like someday I describe it, it's like, the whack-a-mole game. As soon as you think you've got one down, another one pops up. And as they pop up, then strategy will be is to create it and put it in a compartment so that we can basically have it focused on. Because if you try to look at all of this in one big fashion, it is overwhelming. And while it does paint kind of some significant and serious challenges, I also believe that there are opportunities there. Opportunities that we can learn from as to how we can come together to solve common problems and needs. And I think that that's going to be sort of the strategy here ahead. And so I'm looking forward to the future discussions and meeting these challenges. And like I said, I've made my career going into communities and trying to turn them around. I've had some successes, and I've had some spectacular failures, but overall, I've learned a lot of lessons on how to meet these challenges. And I think that this is a strategy of how we can move forward from here.
Thank you for all the energy that's gone into this, David. I know it's taken a large amount of your bandwidth this last month. I think as a board, as in the past when financial or operational issues were presented to us, we'll take them seriously and deal with the things as they come along in a transparent fashion. I think it's important for us to continue to keep the public informed as we determine on how we're going to move forward here. So, and I feel like, and speaking for Todd on the board, but I think it's something based on our track record that we will continue to do. So,
yeah, and we will, be prepared to have a lot of potential meetings between now and the end of the year.
Yeah,
that we're going to have to move fairly quickly on to secure a number of decisions and actions that only the board can do.
Okay. Any other board commentary before we move on? Okay, let's move into do we have a financial report today, David?
No, what we discovered in trying to put together the reports, because of the past reports, Becky has learned that reports that have been presented in the past did not tie to the general ledger. And so she's working now to try to go back and make adjustments to all of those reports to reflect what actuals are to the general ledger, so that you can actually get a more accurate picture. And so it's taking longer than what we thought. But I promise you, if once we get it, then what I'd like to do is maybe call a special meeting, maybe bring it to the Finance and Audit Committee meeting first to review, because we can show you where, and she's highlighting the differences and where the differences occurred. So basically what was not part of the what was not contained in the financial reports presented to the board that didn't reflect what was in the general ledger. So I'm going to be working on that. So I apologize we don't have that ready today.
So then we're moving on to the round robin staff status report. We're starting with sales and marketing.
Great. Thank you. So just a kind of big shout out to our small, nimble team, Jason, Natalie, and Rachel, and their diligence to support and cross-train each other in all the roles of the department. Very much appreciated. Just to state the data and what we know, we've just crested the $500,000 mark in accommodation revenues since reopening, which brings us to about 73% to the end of year goal. Our booking activity continues to be extremely short term, within 2 weeks. Holidays are picking up. Anomalies were last weekend. We had a full house, not really sure why, and just asking our guests, says they just needed to get out, and this was the place. Our Thanksgiving holiday is also nearly full. So our bookings are overwhelmingly non-refundable due to the short nature, and we see that continuing. So we're just using this opportunity now. We just introduced a digital guest survey for visitor feedback. So using that and the data that we can now process to really clean our analytics with a more realistic forecast and data share. So we're moving forward in that direction. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Meow.
So it sounds like we can move on to the next topic. And that would be food and beverage.
Sorry about that. Can you guys
Sorry
hear me?
about that.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can,
Okay.
Holly.
Canteen closed this weekend for the year. Sales dropped drastically, so we went ahead and closed them this weekend. We're going to be expanding Reveille, offering some additional food items and seating moving forward in the first week of November. And Taps has now moved to Wine Down Wednesdays and is really, really killing it with Wine Down Wednesdays. They're doing well, and everybody seems happy and moving forward. And that's what we're trying to do.
Thanks, Holly. Cody, sorry about the dog, everyone. My question for you, you said we were full last weekend. Were they mostly last minute bookings because of the weather?
Both. So again, they're short term, but we did have, day before, we even had some day of, and some of those we had to encourage that they go into town. We just couldn't accommodate them. So again, it's a trend of very, very short term bookings. But to your point, when we asked the visitors, because there really wasn't any activity happening, to draw them, it was literally just to get out, maybe enjoy the last weekend of fall colors. Those are the type of responses that we received.
This is very encouraging news about bookings and, our food outlets. But obviously, I'm stating the obvious, we need to understand revenue versus expense. And I know, David, that's on the agenda to get done as soon as possible. But
Holly, can you remind us of the hours of operation of Taps and
Reveille?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Reveille right now is Monday through Friday from 9 to 2. We're going to expand that just a bit because we have a lot of people coming in earlier. A lot of the partners want to come in and have coffee. So we're going to probably start opening up at 8. And then Taps is open on Wednesdays from 2 to 8. And then Thursday, Friday, Saturday from noon to 8.
Okay.
Cody and Holly, that one slide in the pre-read not the slide around the website, but rather, which was great to see, but the slide that showed some of the attributes and characteristics of our customers that comes out of Maestro, I guess. Maybe it's manipulated by Natalie, not sure, but that kind of thing I think is valuable to have at every board meeting, just so that we and our constituents, our partners, the community, et cetera, have a better understanding of the nature of the breadth of our type of customers.
Right. No, I appreciate that. And I would say our two teams are working very closely together. They have, but I just want to kind of clarify. It's not manipulated by Natalie, so she's kind of our lead on that. We do plan to have that information shared monthly. And it's not all out of Maestro, so it's mostly Google Analytics and Maestro. Maestro would be our visitors. Google Analytics would be some of the demographics, but absolutely we plan to share that. And we're open if there's something else that you're not seeing that you think would be important, just share. Otherwise we'll keep throwing out what the data that we're learning, and that's what we'll share. But we're definitely open to taking it in that direction.
I'd love to take you up on that. I'd love to sit down with Natalie, and manipulate's the wrong word. I understand. But to just brainstorm around all the types of, I think we did that a bit a year and a half ago, but so many things have been lost in all this transition. So I'd love to do it maybe in January.
Right. We're really learning and doing a deep dive, and they have just done a fantastic job of doing that deep dive and learning these tools and the data that we can use and share that even larger than our property, right, with the community,
Absolutely.
and how that impacts everyone, including the partners. So yeah, that's what we look forward to.
Cody, what surprised me was the low share of guests from Oregon. I thought 4% was a shockingly low number, and I think that's worth analyzing, seeing how we might be able to generate more business out of Oregon. Because when I lived there many years ago, Port Townsend was a hot spot for people to go to from the Salem area. So seems to me we have an upside opportunity to grow business from Oregon, especially.
Oh, absolutely. And unfortunately, Oregon has been a hot spot in its own right, that coast. So that may have limited some of the travels or interests. But again, we are just in a place, and we certainly have the people with Natalie, Mrs. Rachel's here, in identifying this. And now that we have this data, and that's what we'll use to go forward. So, and you know, just going there quickly. Well, when we get to that slide, we can touch base. So, thank you.
Aislinn?
Hi.
Hey there.
So on the guest services, the sort of housekeeping and maintenance front, there we're in the period where we're doing like winter planning and deep cleans. We're seeing, as Cody mentioned, like last weekend was booked. We have some more booked weekends coming up. So even though things are they're slowing down, there's still these like bulbs of really a big activity. And I wanted to thank Terry Umbright. He's been helping to counsel us on how to handle these things and sort of how to structure the staffing for these departments so that we are able to accommodate these large times, but then also slimming down sort of in the in-betweens. I think I announced last month that Core retired. He was our longtime head lead porter. And so his replacement, Brett, has been doing a really good job. And that's keeping up just all of the common spaces. It's doing the sanitizing that happens twice a day and everywhere that that the public is, and then in our offices as well. So, you know, there's that extra added level of just existing that we have to do that, you know, wasn't part of how we had to keep things clean before this whole thing. Jess has, you know, heads up the maintenance department. He has brought back, or we have brought back Mike Orr part-time, and Mike's a boiler expert, and we have a lot of boilers on campus that sometimes have creative issues that Mike is just really good at solving. So that's been nice to bring that ability in-house. And there's the news article on the CCC employee. They have started, it was a sort of rehire. It was someone who had worked in a different department who's now come back into the maintenance and grounds department. So that's been successful. I also wanted to thank Norm for bringing us a volunteer, a high school volunteer. And if anybody has little projects like that, you know, feel free to reach out to me. I can find work for them. Holly mentioned we're retooling what's happening with Reveille. So the canteen was successful in selling small retail items. So I am going to be bringing back a retail element to Reveille. And so if you know someone who wants to come spend a day kind of merchandising with me in the next week or two, send them my way. I'd love the help. And I think that's the main update on these departments. We will be doing some Christmas decorating just to make things a little bit cheerier. It's all stuff we have on hand, so it's not any, it's a very inexpensive way to make the fort a little bit more inviting. And I do also want to call out our grounds team has been both like having a battle with leaves and set up a system for people to come take leaves, as they often do for their like composting and gardening needs, but also just keeping up the entryway. And so even though we're running, you know, on a much tighter crew and we still have just as much land and many buildings as we've always had, the team takes that first impressions piece really seriously, and we do have a lot of visitors in the park. So yeah, I just wanted to call out Susan and Grounds on making it a nice, inviting place for people to come to. So that's what's going on in our department. Are there any questions?
Avery, quick question. Have we purchased one of those electrostatic spray disinfectors to use in?
We did not do that. No, and maybe Cindy might be able to speak to this. What I was finding on the data on those was that you have to use them in a very specific way for them to be effective. And what we've also seen on the science on specifically COVID transmission is that surfaces are not a major vector overall. Right. And so what we do instead is we have a rest period between our bookings. So that is a very surefire way to make sure that anything that was in a unit is no longer active or dangerous to people, more so than sending people into a potentially dangerous environment to try to make it not dangerous. So yeah, but Cindy, I would love any input from you if you ended up going that direction or what you know from the industry.
Yeah, we use ours on the soft goods like the sofas and the chairs and the drapes and on the carpet, stuff that you can't wipe down. And it seems to be very effective. And the hospital and the Jeffco, they're all using the electrostatic sprayer. So
I know
it's just another layer of protection.
Habitat for Humanity is using it now in the retail store.
It's good to know. You know, it was on our list, but it was that was back in the days where we thought we might have anything covered by FEMA. And so it just it didn't make sense at the time to invest in those, but I'm happy to look back at that if that is the guidance or an interest from people.
Well, you know, if you want to come down someday, I'll have, you know, I can do a demo for you. It's not cheap, but the product goes a long way. So.
Okay, thank you, Aislinn. Capital projects, David?
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me here?
Yes.
Far eastern Oregon, headed back your way here. So just on the O Road project, the Washington State Parks project for building 4 and 5 is scheduled to have a pre-construction meeting on November 3rd. And then they will begin construction shortly after that. In terms of the Maker Square project, it is still proceeding along. The schedule is slipping bit by bit, unfortunately, due to last minute changes related into the KPTZ space mostly. Right now we're scheduled for the first week in December, and I'm going to be meeting with Clark this week to come review their detailed schedule. As we all know, we need to be done and complete by the end of the year with the certificate of occupancy. And I've also been trying to open up lines of communication with the city of Port Townsend to ensure that we have all inspections and sign-offs that are needed from the city standpoint so we can get that certificate of occupancy that we need here. Park construction has been proceeding along. Lots of activity is going on. I'm not sure when the last time any of the board members have been around or been able to go through the space, but buildings 308 and 324 are looking mostly complete. We've just got some lighting and fans to go in those two buildings there, and they'll be wrapping up relatively soon. Building 305, there's been some conversations going on with Department of Historic Preservation in regards to painting and finishes, but those are underway right now also. And then the bulk of the work remaining will wind up in KPTZ's space, finishing up their chipboard and acoustics and HVAC system within the areas there. But all of that is moving along, and Clark has still been very good in terms of working with us, even with our outstanding balances. I know we will have some conversations here towards at the end of this week with them about continuing to move forward here. So, and then we'll have one final look around the site to make sure we've got all rough spots straightened out and that all of our buildings truly are ADA accessible there. And you might notice a little bit of rework on the paving out in front of building 305. There were a couple of areas that were rejected because we were retaining too much water in them, and they're repatching and doing those also there. Most of our concrete work that was part of this phase of the project is done. Exterior concrete work is done. And if you have a chance to go look at the west side deck there, it's going to be an awesome event space for us there. It looks pretty impressive. Any questions from members?
David, are any of the items that you said are delayed to early December, are they projects that would impact the certificate of occupancy?
I got it. Yes, they are. And that's what I'm working with Clark on. We still feel good about being done, by the end of the first week of December at this point, but that's what I'm reviewing this Thursday or tomorrow with Clark, their updated schedule to see what we've got going. Clark is fully aware that we need the certificate of occupancy before the end of the year there. Otherwise we're toast. So they know the pressure that we're under, and that pressure relates and translates directly to them. So.
And are we current paying them?
No. We will be, well, this is when they would be preparing another pay application for us also. So their last pay application to us was about 600, and we had an outstanding balance of 150. And we have not been able to make that payment, waiting for the LCP grant paperwork to come through, which would cover most of the bill there. And we will be receiving another draft billing from them either this week or next week. And then they will be deciding whether or not they're going to turn that into an official bill to us or pay application to us, as they have to pay Washington State tax the moment that it becomes a true billed event here. So.
Okay.
Just a quick update to it. I've spoken to the grant administrator. There's 3 documents that we need to submit for them to attach to the contract to go forward. But I'd say probably, because it has to go get reviewed by the Attorney General, quick turnaround time is probably 30 days. So I've been talking to Clark about what their requirements are going to be. Currently, only have about $20,000 in the capital account, which is not going to be enough. But the grant is $543,000. And so I asked Kitsap Bank if they would, and they suggested offering us a grant anticipation note, which would be like a 90-day note that they would advance the funds so that we could then, when we get the grant, we pay the note off. So I should hear today if that works, and that will help bring the bills more current. And that's also the reason why it's such a critical time to get the Maker Square loan financing in place.
Okay.
Norm,
Dave.
Norm, on capital projects as well, I included in your packet a recommended list from the Washington State Parks and Recreation Commission to the governor for capital projects. And if you guys go in and look in page 21 under number priority 52 and 56 are 2 Fort Worden projects. One's for a water line of 558 and 56. Priority 56 is for housing exteriors, and that's a little over $2 million. The housing exteriors would probably take 2 Officer Row buildings offline for 6 months. So David and I will be talking to State Parks about that as well in terms of the timing. So to put that in context, that's not that's $2.5 million for this next biennium, as opposed to the last biennium when we got almost $6.5 million. But of that 6.5, 3.5 of the million was to fix the failing water and sewer lines, which was officer row and NCA row. So just kind of putting that in context, State Parks has kind of changed the way they're doing capital planning. They're putting together a kind of a pool account. And so they have larger amounts in just kind of a statewide pool for like ADA improvements. They have a pool of $4 million. And then they also have a pool of $6 million just for infrastructure repairs. Those are more kind of like the emergency repairs. I think there's an opportunity for us to talk with State Parks about some of those emergency repairs that David identified early on and how we want to coordinate having those higher priorities, assuming that the capital budget is approved by the legislature. So we'll keep you appraised of that as we start having those conversations with State Parks.
The collaborative, Dave?
The collaborative, it's been meeting, the long-term group's been meeting every other week. The collaborative as a whole has been meeting on a monthly basis. We've been working, I think, very well together, and Todd can jump in here, but one of the big pieces that we're working on right now is an RFP for a consultant team to come in, and it's kind of part and parcel of kind of figuring out our new normal. And so what we're looking at is trying to get one of our county PIF grant converted to a planning grant for $150,000. It's going to have a capital planning component to it. And I've been working on a scope of work with the collaborative and Todd to go out with an RFP. So it really has 4 phases of business planning. The first is to really review our current situation, which all the financial information that David's doing is feeding into that, and the partners are also doing the self-assessment as well. And there's a lot of work in that first phase that the collaborative will be working on between now and the end of January to really be able to set the foundation so the consultant team can come in and help us begin the second phase, which is really define a new operating model. So a lot of what David laid out today, it will feed into that. And then as we begin to work with the collaborative and the PDA through that planning process with a qualified business plan team, they would go in and do the economic analysis of what are the kind of the operating alternatives that we would want to look at, and then come up with some strategies for plan implementation, which would include potential changes to the organizational structure or our governance structure, how we work with partners, identify new partnerships, as well as fundraising opportunities. So that's being laid out in a very comprehensive scope of work in RFP. And by Friday, collaborative participants are supposed to get me comments on the draft RFP. I've already received comments from Mitch from the Friends, Renee, Rob Berman, Peter Herzog from State Parks, Heron from the Woodworking School, and then of course Todd and Norm. So I'll be reworking of those comments into a new draft and taking that to the long-term committee next week. And then the full Fort Worden collaborative, I think it's on the 12th. And then what we would do is bring that to the full PDA board. And the idea is if we have the funding in place, we would begin to advertise the RFP in December, and then do a consultant selection process in January, and then really begin the business planning process with the collaborative and the PDA board February through probably the end of July. So that's the timeline. What I'd like to do is send out the next draft to PDA board members, and if you guys could review that and provide comment to me, I would incorporate any of your comments before we get to the full collaborative. And then the collaborative will be reviewing it one more time on the 12th, and then we'll be bringing it to the full PDA board. So that's kind of the process that we've outlined. And then Todd, is there anything that you would like to elaborate on that process?
Well, at our last meeting, we also, as part of the background process, we as a group, identified assumptions related to this process. So there's a series of assumptions that we probably have 20 or 25 particular specific assumptions that we are making about this process, such as involving many stakeholders, a wide range of stakeholders. Planning will continue to occur in a time of great uncertainty. So we assume that we'll end up with a smaller management structure, for example, just one of those assumptions. So there's a whole host of assumptions that I think we can share with the board as well, along with a draft of the RFP.
So I would just like to make one comment. I would hope that this group has a clear understanding of what it takes to operate the fort and what the challenges are, because that should drive a lot of, or help inform a lot of decisions. And I know Dave Timmons is working on that. I just hope it is in time that it can be utilized with this process we're going through.
That's really the first phase of the work, is for all the partners and the PDA to understand our current situation with our financial needs, our financial realities, and where we think we want to go in the future, and some of the limitations and the uncertainty on how we work together to plan for that.
Good.
So I think you'll be reassured when you see the list of questions and the work that the PDA and the collaborative is doing together right now.
Great, thanks. We have a number of actions we have to take now. David, do you want to start with the Kitsap Bank refinancing action?
I'm sorry to interrupt for just a second, but it's harder to see when people come and go. So I just wanted to note for the votes that are coming up, Jeff has left the meeting for another meeting. And Cindy, are you still on for this, or were you going to have to leave?
No, I've got to leave in about 15 minutes.
I think we'll still have quorum, but I just want to mention that because it's harder to see on Zoom than we're in a room together.
Thank you for doing that. Yeah.
So what I'm asking for is the board to give me authority to work with the treasurer of the board to negotiate with Kitsap Bank, finalize terms for the refinancing of the Maker Square clamping and the energy efficiency project. As I mentioned before my presentation earlier, that these will probably be separate loans that'll come forward in the separate time schedules, but this will kind of establish an official record that authorizes me to begin these discussions with the treasurer and the bank.
Okay. Any board discussion? Do people feel like they have enough information on this item?
When would the payments be due? Does it depend?
I've been, in the discussions that I've had with them, we've established some kind of preliminary terms, and the payment wouldn't be due for 2 to 3 years. We've got to finalize that. So we wouldn't have payments until 2024 or 2025. Depends on the structure of the loan, whether it be a 2-year deferral or 3.
I'm assuming, David, with accruing interest during that period of time.
Well, what they roll it forward is what they do. They roll it into the term of the note, so that it just means it has a higher, it affects a higher interest rate. So you're just rolling the deferral into the interest cost, but also there is no prepayment penalty for that. So if we do capital funding or create another partnership model that generates the income, then that can be a prepayment and paid off early.
Any other further questions or comments? Without any, can I have a motion to take action on item number 10?
So moved.
Moved on.
Second.
Was that Herb who seconded?
And Terry.
Yes.
Okay, great. Any further dialogue? All in favor of approval, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. The motion carries. We have a state audit resolution to consider. David?
Yeah, this will be for the audit we talked about that's coming forward. The way it works is they will submit to us a proposed plan with a budget and a letter of engagement. So this authorizes me to execute that letter of engagement and bring it back to the board for report on what the budgetary implications will look like going forward through the process, because this is something that it's not done free as a part of the state program. It's actually at the expense of the PDA.
Can they start the audit before the board approves the amount, or do we need to approve the amount, or what?
No, they can start the audit before. They kind of have an independent authority. So you're kind of subject to their conditions.
They send us the bill and that's that. Okay.
Yeah, it's a little negotiable, but not much.
Yeah.
They actually said they didn't even need us to authorize this, but it's been our practice as a board to approve this.
So moved.
Okay, second.
I will second that.
Okay, moved by Jane, seconded by Terry. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, the action carries. KPTZ lease terms. Dave?
Yeah, so in your packet, I believe it's on page 28, we have draft lease terms between the PDA and KPTZ, and I'll do this in a tag team this with Norm and Todd. We've been working on these lease terms for many months, and it's a pretty unique partnership with KPTZ. And some of that is due to the capital investment that they're making in the basement of Building 305 in Maker Square. And the other piece of this is the historic tax credit, which is an integral part of the lease. So in your lease terms, I'll just highlight some of the really important provisions. So it's a as-is condition. And as you guys know, KPTZ has been doing the renovation of the basement, which is about 2,300 square feet. And one of the things that we've worked out with KPTZ is that they would be eligible for historic tax credits. And those historic tax credits right now are about $160,000 based on their eligible cost for reimbursement from the HTCs. The things that HTCs require is a longer term, and HTCs require a term of 19 years to satisfy the historic tax credit. So at this time, what we're proposing is a term of 19 years with a potential 10-year extension that would be negotiated upon completion of the 19-year term. Based on the construction schedule, we've identified that rent would begin as soon as the certificate of occupancy is probably in hand, or January 1. So that's where we're moving ahead. As I mentioned, KPTZ is doing a fairly extensive investment in the basement. The last time we looked at their schedule of values, which will be attachment B, it was about $809,000. And I think Norm will talk to you a little bit about how we're giving them credit for their capital investment of about $350,000. That's while they may be investing $809,000 or more into the basement, the tenant improvement that we don't have to pay for is about $350,000. So they get a credit for that. So Norm, do you want to talk about the rent spreadsheet, which is attachment A?
Sure. And Joan is going to project this. I'm going to try to do this as logically as possible, so bear with me. So this is the rent spreadsheet that we've gone through with KPTZ. The first area I want you to focus on is the box on the left side of the page, the current, where it talks about current lease rate and the number of terms. If you remember, the appraisal for the KPTZ space was 80 cents a square foot. So it looks like the things aren't lining up exactly right, but that it is, okay. 80 cents square foot is the market rate in the appraisal. The 2.5% is the annual escalation of rent costs, assuming cost of living increases. As Dave said, because it's a historic tax credit transaction, it needs to have a 19-year term. And the other thing that is important, and it's not on this slide, although it's calculated into this slide, is that we're providing a 35% capital investment offset. So that is shown in the yellow column in the middle of the page. Now, there are a couple of things that are unique about this lease compared to others that we've looked at together. The first that Dave called out was historic tax credits. You'll notice two columns to the right of the yellow shaded column. You'll see our effort to reimburse KPTZ for the historic tax credits. They're allowing us to keep those proceeds at the close of the historic tax credit transaction. So we're applying it back to their rent. The next thing that is a little different about this transaction, and it gets to the $350,000 number that Dave mentioned earlier. That $350,000 is the number that the PDA would have had to invest had KPTZ not been involved in this transaction. So for us, it's looked at as a foregone expense. It's something that we were able to avoid because of KPTZ's participation. So that yellow shaded column, you'll notice at the bottom, the total says just under $187,000. What Todd, Dave, and I agreed to do, because it is cost avoidance for us, is to then give KPTZ an additional credit to get them to that $350,000 number. And again, if KPTZ had not been involved in this, we would have incurred that $350,000. So when you do all the work and run all the math, the last yellow highlighted column on the bottom right-hand side of the page, a little over $22,000, that is the dollar amount that KPTZ will reimburse us for over the term of the lease after the capital investment offsets and the HTC offset. That dollar amount originally, when we completed this exercise, hit in aggregate in year 19. What KPTZ asked us to do was to actually spread that dollar amount over year 11 to year 19. So that's why you'll see some dollar amounts, some smaller dollar amounts there. If KPTZ had paid that total dollar amount in year 19, that the final effective lease rate for them would have been 80 cents a square foot, which is, and it's lower than the number in the first column, because of that capital investment offset. That's what really lowers it. So, but you'll notice the lease rates on this look very low. They're very low because we're spreading that year 19 cost over years 11 through 19. And that's all I know about this. Any questions?
Just a couple other things. The lease terms are pretty standard, but you'll notice on page 30 in your packet, there's two other things. The campus area maintenance fee. We've been working with on that for a while, and we anticipate going forward that all leases, all new leases in the campus area will be charged an annual common area campus fee. We need to finish that process with the partners and come up with a fair and equitable rate, and it would likely be based on a square footage that partners have for their exclusive use buildings. The other thing that's somewhat unique to KPTZ is Building 305 will have some common area maintenance. And you guys may recall when we did the Building 202 project, it took us about 2 years to figure out the common area maintenance. So in Building 202, for example, there's common areas, and then there's shared areas, and then there's also exclusive use by the college. So we developed a formula with Peninsula College for the common area maintenance. So based on about 2 years of operation, we'll come up with a Building 305 common area maintenance and work with KPTZ to come up with a fair and equitable cost for that. So that's work to be done over the next 2 years to kind of standardize that going forward for all leases for the campus area maintenance fee, and in specific case for 305, the building area, common area, because the restrooms are shared and some other spaces are shared. So, any questions on the KPTZ lease? I also wanted to share that folks from KPTZ are on the call. I saw that earlier, and they've been great to work with Aubrey Ambrose and Ray Sermon and Thomas Norges. So I think they're still on the call if we have questions of KPTZ.
They are.
Yeah, they are on the call, and they just need to hit *9 if there's something that they needed or wanted to add to this, or press that button next to their names, and then I'll see them.
David, this is Terry. Kind of an operating question now. I'm assuming they're broadcasting out of there, right? Is there technical challenges there? Where's the antenna and so forth?
Yeah, so that's probably better served for David to talk, David Beckman or them. We're still working out the final antenna location and how they're tying to their broadcasting transmitter middle point right now. But those are some of the final details that are being worked out. One thing to note that those kind of costs aren't eligible for historic tax credits, because the only eligible costs for historic tax credits are those actual costs that help convert the building to renovate it, and preserve its historic features.
So it's not the equipment. It's not the technical equipment.
Yeah. And again, KPTZ also has a strong component for emergency broadcast systems, as well as, all their productions in terms of the events, the interviews, the news, and the programming that they do.
They will have a generator as well, I believe. So.
Just to clarify, there is no generator. They have a backup battery system. We're designing systems that where a generator could be brought in if needed.
Thank you, Dave.
Dave, I have a few comments on the term sheet that just clarifications and so forth that I'll go over with you offline after this.
Okay.
This is Herb.
Yes, Herb.
I have a question for Dave. In the lease term attachment C, the lease terms, who is landlord?
The PDA.
Are you sure? Because my understanding was that landlord would be an LLC that is a subsidiary of the Fort Worden Foundation.
That's correct. The lease terms will have to reference that as well. So those are some of the final documents that we're going to be bringing back her, because the historic tax credits require that as well. But the general terms would go along, but the other pieces of the HTC transaction with the LLCs would reference the general terms.
I bring it up only to refer back to one of the items on David Timmons's worksheet, which is working on the relationship between the PDA and the Fort Worden Foundation. Because of the requirement of the historic tax credits, there's going to be that ongoing relationship and the ongoing existence of this LLC, which at least nominally will be the landlord for Building 305, and indeed, I think, for all of Maker Square. And so it's not going to be perhaps as easy as we would all like to separate the foundation from the PDA for practical purposes.
So one of the pieces here that it still needs to be done is to reference the LLCs with the KPTZ lease. So what we're asking for the motion here is to approve the term sheet with KPTZ and to authorize the PDA board chairs to negotiate a final lease agreement with KPTZ. And some of those companion HTC documents will also be part of the lease agreement with KPTZ. And as you, I think you're aware, Herb, the LLC has the lease for 5 years, and then it comes back to the PDA. And so that needs to be reflected in the lease agreement.
Other questions for Dave, Todd, or me? Do you have anything to add around the discussion on this? No. Okay.
No, I don't.
Okay. Without any questions, can I ask for a motion to approve the term sheet and to authorize the co-chairs to negotiate a final lease agreement with KPTZ?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Herb, seconded by Terry. Any further dialogue? All in favor of approving the motion, say aye.
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 Norm, I would,
Oh,
I'm sorry, I would like to say, outside of the voting, is that I think we're very, very fortunate to have KPTZ as an anchor tenant in Maker Square. They bring so much to the table, you know, in public benefit and benefit to the fort. You know, it's going to be exciting to have KPTZ there.
mm-hmm. I think that's a great point. And Todd and I were pulled into this negotiation late with Rufina's absence from the port these days. And I have to say, it was a very collegial conversation the entire time. I think this is going to really be a great partnership. So I want to really thank Robert, Dominic, and Ray for how they went about these negotiations. So thank you. Our next motion, Todd and I have work to do before the next meeting. If we do have a special meeting, we would try to bring it to a special meeting to put together an employment contract with David Timmons as Dave Robinson's retirement date draws near. So this is just to authorize Todd and I to negotiate the terms of this employment contract.
And again, we're assuming that David will not be full-time. You know, that's still to be discussed, but that was one of the assumptions going forward at this point. So.
Yep. Any questions by the board? No.
Well, given what's on his plate, I don't know how he cannot be full-time.
He's
Let's not discuss that. Huh?
This is
But any,
this is
can I have
David.
a motion then to authorize Todd and me to negotiate the terms of the contract with David?
So moved.
So moved.
Okay, it's been moved by Guy, seconded by Terry. Any further dialogue? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Great, the motion carries. And I'm glad to hear that David didn't try to fake one of our voices on the opposed part. Thanks for being here, David. Todd, PDA board descriptions and liaisons. You're muted, Todd.
You have in your packet on page 48 and beyond, the current position description. We call it a job description, which is really not appropriate. Position description and expectations for members of the board of directors. And in looking at that, I've shared it with the mayor and Heron Scott, who's been working with us on the concept of liaisons. And as I looked over the position description, I really felt there was a need for some revisions in the current description. So those revisions are in yellow. And
some noise from somewhere.
someone needs to mute.
I'm looking at the list to see if I can see the sound, an indication of who it is.
I think it's David.
So I'll be there probably basically within the hour.
Yep, I got him muted.
All right. So the additions are in yellow. Strikeouts are using a strikeout, and there's only one. What I've discovered, actually Heron picked up on it, was we were inconsistent with the number of designated members of the board between this job description, this position description, and the charter. So I'm bringing it back into alignment with what the charter says. And then I've added there that ex officio PDA board members will not count, will count toward the board total. So, and we're proposing that there'll be 2 liaisons to ex officio liaisons to the board. One will be representing the partners, selected by the partners, but reviewed by the nominating committee. And the other will be a city representative. Again.
Sorry, I couldn't quite hear you.
Sorry.
Could you please repeat what you said?
That was my Siri. I'm sorry. I don't know how that happened. Again, the mayor, the city council will select the liaison to our board. The mayor has already indicated that she is going to select herself, or the city council. And I very much welcome that. She's really putting in some time to the PDA through the collaborative and is willing to invest her time in helping us move forward. So then you have a new draft of a position description for the liaisons, which parallels the draft for board members to some extent, but with some changes, obviously. Liaisons as ex officio don't have the same fiduciary responsibility and other responsibilities. So I use words like represent, advise, assist, and so forth in their description. And then the selection process, again, this year it's a little bit different because of timing, but those selections, partners and city will come back to the nominating committee by email in the next week or so. And then we will forward those onto the city council along with the board, the nominating committee's recommendations for board members. And there will be 3 of those and 2 liaisons. They will go together to the city council as a package for the city council to consider and act on. In the future, those selections for liaisons will come to the nominating committee in the same process that nominations come to the to the nominating committee, and would be, they'd have an interview and they'd be considered along with permanent board members, and then recommended to the city council.
Is there, I mean, maybe I should know this, but does an ex officio member never have the vote? Is that part of being ex officio? Or
They never have the vote. They are
they
voice,
never have the vote? Okay.
voice but no vote.
Okay. That's not a decision we made. That's just the nature of the position.
Generally, yes. Yeah, and that's the first bullet indicates ex officio.
No, I see that. I just wanted to know, was that our decision or is that?
That's our decision.
That is our decision not to give them a vote.
That's correct. So they are ex officio. They're not full voting board members. And they will be able to join committees and executive sessions upon invitation by the chairs or the co-chairs. So I anticipate there will be some circumstances where it'd be appropriate to have one or both in executive session, and there'll be circumstances where neither one would be appropriate in executive session.
Well, I think this is a great addition to our board. It's a long time coming and I'm really excited about it.
I agree.
Other comments? Without any, can I have a motion to approve both the revised PDA board member position description and the new position description for the ex officio liaison roles?
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Jane, seconded by Leila. Any further dialogue? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Norman, let me just clarify again on the ex officio. That was an agreement also. It wasn't a unilateral decision on our part. It was agreed upon with the mayor and the partner rep, Heron Scott.
Okay, great. And David Timmons, item number 15, regarding the appointment of a claims agent.
Let me come back to life here. Yeah, this was something that we came across in a file that was left over many months ago. And it's a common practice of where organization appoints a claims agent. And what that is sort of when, if any kind of claim that is claiming tort damages must first be presented to the claim agent. In this case, it would be the designated person. But in absence of that, they could serve anybody associated with the organization. And that person may not know what they have and know what to do with it. So from a risk management standpoint, it's good to have it. And this came from the Pacifica Law Group, their recommendation that people look to see if it does have an established claim. And if not, they should make one. So this is not new in response to any current issue. This is basically a housekeeping matter that we came across that was in a file that had been forgotten about. So what, in the city, for instance, I was named and the clerk were named as the official agents to receive any claims. And this is a requirement because if it isn't properly served, then the claim can't be advanced into the courts. It's a statutory requirement once this is in place. And it's really to protect the exposure of the organization.
Didn't it say that it was for municipalities or does it apply to us as well?
It applies to the PDAs as well, because you are a quasi-municipal organization.
Other questions for David?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
By Todd, seconded for Leila. Any further discussion? All in favor of approving resolution 2019? Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, The motion carries. I'd like to open the floor again for public comment.
Last call for public comments. *9 if you're on the phone, or just go ahead and find the icon to raise your hand if you're joining us by internet.
While we were on
Jeopardy music in the background while I wait for this.
While we were talking about the ex officio, the liaison roles, Heron responded saying the partner meeting is this Friday to discuss and nominate their rep. So I wanted to make sure the board saw that.
Thanks, Aaron. That's terrific. Thank you.
And we don't have anyone who's raised their hand for public comment. So I think that wraps that up.
Okay. Any closing thoughts, Todd?
Just a question, could the annual report, is it available as an independent PDF? I mean, it's in the package here, but as I'm looking online to see if it stands on its own, it'd be nice to be able to have it independently.
Yeah, I'll post that online. I can do that right after the meeting. Actually.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Joan.
Mm-hmm.
And Joan, could we get a copy of David Timmons' slides?
Yes, and that will also, that can be with our public records on the website as well. And I'll send that out to you all now too.
With no further comment, we will go ahead and adjourn the meeting. We have a scheduled meeting for November 25th. My guess is we will probably have a special meeting with everything going on. So stay tuned, and Joan will try to find a time that best serves all our calendars. So thanks to staff for all the work that they're doing.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye now.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, bye.